Youth sports can be really hard, especially if you're wanting to raise your kid in ways that produce healthy adults when they're done playing. Each week on Healthy Sports Parents, we have conversations designed to help you keep your athlete mentally and emotionally healthy. Whether you're just starting out in rec ball or you're traveling every weekend to elite tournaments, we're here to help you strengthen your relationship with your kids through sports. If we haven't met, my name is Jonathan Carone, and I'm the host of the show. Today, we're joined by Lindsey Nadler. She's the founder and head mental performance coach at Elite Mental Edge, a company dedicated to changing women's sports by equipping athletes and coaches with mental skills training. Lindsey specializes in helping female athletes develop an elite mental edge to thrive at the next level, while also empowering coaches to seamlessly integrate mental skills into their programming coaching. On top of all of that, Lindsey is a former D1 softball player, a high school coach, former police officer with crisis intervention expertise, and she has a bachelor's degree in psychology. She combines all that to create practical, simple strategies to transform the mental game and drive peak performance. Welcome in Coach Lindsey Nadler. Coach Lindsey, thanks for joining us. Go ahead and say hey to everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, so we start every episode talking to mom or dad before we talk to the professional. And I know you've said you're a stepmom, but you don't have any kids who currently play, but you have a unique perspective because you are aunt.
Yes.
You have nephews and nieces who play, and we haven't had that perspective yet. So what is it like to be Aunt Lindsey to some athletes?
Oh man, I understand. Like I talk to sports parents all the time just about how difficult this is and how we're always like projecting our own athletic careers onto our kids. And I'm cool Aunt Lindsay who played college softball and who is also this mental performance coach. So there's like that element of pressure there as well. But I consider my niece and
How
nephew.
dare you get it wrong? If you
Oh,
get it wrong.
right, correct. So it's like I really have to practice what I preach. And so I'll be in the stands and, want to quickly like rush to try to like, my niece plays basketball, right? Like as if anybody can hear me in the stands, like as if she can hear me amidst all the noise, like telling her to rebound or box out. So it's like I really have to take my own advice to, just be quiet or cheer and, enjoy the game. So I get it. I get it for sure.
That's fine. My nieces and nephews live 2 hours away, so I haven't got to see them play. I don't know what I would do if I got to watch them play. So that's a really cool perspective.
Yeah, and I'm
The first,
there. I work with them too. I work with my
that's
niece,
awesome.
playing basketball. So it's like I do kind of, I want to just like, get in there and help. But at the end of the day, I have to
So
remember
you're
like,
aunt and coach.
yeah. And so, but I have to remember like, my niece like just wants me to take her to get a snow cone. Like she doesn't,
Most kids just want the ice cream after the game. Like
yeah,
it's
she just wants that Sonic drink, So she,
yeah.
and I have to take my own advice. So.
We had a game in the spring, no, the fall that it was. I'm a rec league soccer coach, and we did a little 1 day tournament after the end of the season. And I told our parents going into that game, whatever our last game is, win or lose, I want to go to the local ice cream place and get ice cream to celebrate the season. So before the first game, the kids are like, "We're going to get ice cream afterwards." I was like, if we win, we'll go after the second game. Well, do you have to win that one? No, you're getting ice cream no matter what today. And that was the bigger cheer than when we won the tournament
Exactly.
because they wanted ice cream more than like at 8 and 9 years old, they cared just as much about ice cream as they did about the result on the field.
Yes, and that's like the nostalgia, right? Like I remember like we're going to the Dairy Queen after the game, you're getting that dip cone, like,
Yep.
that's a core memory I think of every athlete's childhood.
Except it was in the 90s, so we got to pile in the bed of pickup trucks
Correct.
and
Yep.
go from the baseball field to the place.
Yes,
Um,
correct.
okay, so we had a Division I softball player who's now a
Hmm.
child psychologist on here a few weeks ago,
Hmm.
and every time I post clips of that episode, I mean, she's got a doctor with her name. Like she's gone through all of the schooling. There are inevitably people who they like to question the idea of bringing psychology techniques into sports, and
Hmm.
they say we're making kids soft. All these different things that I know you've talked about before.
Yeah.
But if we're being entirely gracious to those people, which I don't like being sometimes because it gets annoying after a while, how would you lay the foundation for why your mindset is such an important part of athletics?
Yeah, so I think when we start using the word psychology, I think a lot of people get very misguided. They think that psychology is like woo woo or not real, isn't a real science, or
People have
they
said that in the comments.
yeah, which is incorrect. And they often think that it's when they hear the word psychology, they immediately think, oh, we're going to talk about our feelings all day long. We're going to just talk about our feelings and how everything makes us feel. When what we're referring to with sports psychology is actually neuroscience. So this has been widely studied and researched about the power of our brain and performance. And you can, I mean, it's like you can argue with, I mean, do you want to argue with science like all day long? Like I just,
Yes, they do.
right. So it's like you can, and also what I always tell parents or people that have something to say, I'm like, is it working for you? Like as Dr. Phil says, like if it's working for you and you're getting the results that you want, ignore me, block me, do your own thing. But if it's not work,
Hard press and click not interested on TikTok.
right, and be on your way. But if you're interested in research, if you're interested in science, and then we have to understand that the brain is not wired for performance. And mental skills and sports psychology is all about how we combine the brain and the body to get athletes the best results. And so the brain is not wired for performance. It's not wired for any of these things that our young athletes are experiencing. The brain is wired for safety. The brain is
Mm-hmm.
wired for security. Then we also have to take a look at the what we call the great rewiring, which is something social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has talked about at length in his work in the book The Anxious Generation. And what he describes is that about circa 2010, because of technology advances, because of social media, because of the hypervigilance, helicopter parenting that exists, and also because humans evolve. I don't know if we believe in evolution here. That may be another thing that the audience wants to wants to dispute, right? But as humans, there's something called evolution, evolutionary psychology, and we have this brain that's always evolving, that's always adapting. And what's happened is that over time, the brain has adapted to not be as emotionally resilient. Think about this: you can find anything that you need immediately on your phone. The ability to get out and work and problem solve and do all of these things that develop emotional and mental resiliency has kind of been taken from us. So technology is great, but there's a cost to it, and the
Mm-hmm.
brain has adapted because of it. And so what we're seeing is so many athletes, specifically females, really, really struggling with the ability to overcome mistakes and to deal with the pressure of their sport because their brain is so rooted in safety and survival. So, I mean, we can argue, we can continue to continue to argue. We can look at the science and adapt.
I am in marketing in my day job.
Hmm.
And I even use that same language in that when I'm talking to organizations, I use the brain, like the way I say is our brain is constantly trying to do two things. Is it trying to, if what we're doing, is it help me survive or does it help me thrive?
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, our brain naturally wants to throw those things away.
Hmm.
And competition, having to work harder when there is an easier option, your brain is naturally going to choose the easier option because it wants to it wants to conserve calories and it wants to not work as hard. It wants to do the thing that's going to be easiest.
Yeah.
That's natural.
Yeah, absolutely. The brain is not wired for performance. It is wired for safety and survival. That is number one. Number one, period.
I think if we understand that, the survival aspect of it, and like the example I always use as well is at the end of the day, our brain wants to know who's going to be on our side when the zombies come through the cul-de-sac after us.
Yeah.
Like it wants, like the caveman wanted to know who was going to support him when the cavemen from across the field came and attacked them.
Hmm.
Like that's just a natural neuroscience fact. And
Hmm.
so when we think about coaching kids or parenting our kids, if we're yelling at them and criticizing them, their brain naturally thinks that we are not their safe place, that
Hmm.
we are not on their side. And so they're going to shut us down because the brain wants something that's going to help them, not something that's going to hurt them.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have an option. We can continue to go old school at this, or again, you can look at what the research says, or what actually gets us best result, of what actually is going to help the brain feel safe, which is that positive reinforcement. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have standards, we don't have boundaries, we don't have discipline. But again, is what you're doing working? And are you, I'll never forget, one of my mentors told me this. She said, Lindsay, you can have athletes that fear you and you'll get a certain result with that. Or you can have athletes that love you and respect you. And those athletes will go to war for you, will do
Mm-hmm.
anything that you ask them to do. And I think for so long, so many coaches have kind of taken on this militant, hyper masculine, old school approach. Because if we think about it,
The
even
Bobby Knights, the Coach
yeah,
K's,
and
like,
even females, because most females have been coached by males, and it's just a trickle down effect. Sometimes we parent how we were parented, and we don't realize, that there's another way. And so most athletes, when you're yelling, you're inviting in an additional stress response. And again, I yell, but I don't yell at, I don't demean.
mm-hmm.
I'm a very energetic, passionate coach as well. I'm a former police officer, so I am extremely. I mean, I am militant, sergeant, boot camp. But and when I started coaching again, I quickly realized, oh, that is not going to get you the result that you want. Now, when I go into that mode, it's because I'm getting my athletes back. That's like at a referee or an umpire, or that passion I will definitely bring, but I'm never going to demean, embarrass, crawl an athlete like that. It's not going to get the result that you want. Our athletes in stress, they're typically going to do one of four things. They're either going to fight, so they're going to push back, force, snarky, bad attitude, okay? Or the flight response, which is athletes, they want to avoid, they shut down, they kind of quit, they pout, they just want to get out. The third response is that freeze response. So athletes will panic, I don't know, or they'll start making stupid mistakes they've never made before ever. They'll feel like, I don't even know how to throw this rise ball. Like, I don't even know how to shoot a foul shot. Like, it's this weird thing that happens.
The yips.
Yeah. Or, which is so interesting, we see this happen so often with female athletes, is something that nobody really talks about a lot, and that's the fawn response, which is when athletes become hyper fixated and hyper vigilant on what everyone else is saying or doing. So what the coach is doing, what the coach is saying. Does coach hate me? Does coach like me? Parents in the stands, peers, friend groups, who's at the game that day, are recruiters in the stands. And what they don't realize is when they become hyper fixated on what everybody else is doing, number one, they give their power away. But number two, they start to dim themselves without realizing it, and it affects their performance. I hear from so many coaches that don't really know how to handle this either, where they're like, these girls are so hyper vigilant. If I don't show up every single day to practice with a smile on my face, they think I hate them.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't
I had a
think.
9-year-old last year in rec league soccer. He's like, "Are you mad at me?"
Yeah,
No, I'm not. I'm not mad. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I might be frustrated. I'm frustrated that we didn't do that well. Like, are you
yeah,
like, at halftime on the bench? Are you mad at us? I was like, no, I'm not mad. I'm frustrated that we didn't do the things we worked on,
yeah,
but I am not mad at you guys at all. Like,
yeah.
but
Think
she
about
like,
that. Hmm.
thankfully she verbalized it.
Yeah, good for her.
She's a girl that will ask the questions, but like, it took me off guard so much that
Hmm.
me instructing them that I would be asked in the middle of a game if I was mad at them.
Yep. Yep. Think about that. Think about that. Like that's the feeling of safetiness that we talk about in the brain, to where we can't be hyper fixated on what coach is doing, what everybody around us is doing. Like, that is a very real issue. And it's normal.
Yeah.
It's a normal human response.
And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate so much of the content you put out, because many of us were taught when it comes to sports, we
Hmm.
have to shut down our emotions.
Mm.
And like you gotta be a brick wall out there. You can't show emotions. Emotions are bad.
Yeah.
And we were taught that in life in general, but especially on the field. And so now when our kids start showing emotion, this is not a dig at past generations, but our parents didn't know how to psychologically deal with our emotions. So they did the best they could with the tools they had.
Right.
So we didn't have it modeled for us how to handle emotions and strong emotional reactions.
Yeah.
But you talk so much about how emotions are good.
Yeah.
And emotions, when reframed and positioned the right way, can almost be a superpower.
Absolutely.
Can you give us your spiel on that, because it's so freaking good?
Yeah, so I think that, like you said, Jonathan, most coaches are teaching our young females specifically, like, be robots, be warriors, be a Navy SEAL. Okay, like, stuff it, numb it, which kind of results often with our girls doing this whole, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. They
Hmm.
stuff, stuff, stuff. And then we all know what happens from that type of
Yep.
energy. It's just more of the same, right? Because what you resist persists. And you'll never be able to reach peak performance by numbing your emotions. What we can do is hack and harness those emotions to get us the result that we want by understanding which emotions are going to drive our actions. We use a model called the reframe process, which is rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically that our thoughts create our emotions, and our emotions create our actions, and our actions drive our results. Whether we realize it or not, all of us are getting the results that we want in our life because of the emotions that lead to those actions, right? Every
Hmm.
action that we take is based on an emotion, or action that we don't take
Hmm.
is driving from an emotion. So we have to stop saying that emotions are bad and that we have to numb and that we soldier up. Some of the best athletes that I've seen are some of the most passionate,
Hmm.
emotional athletes. We have to give them an avenue, a vehicle to do that. When I watch Michael Jordan play, uh, all I see is passion
Anger
and
is an emotion.
emotion.
Like, we
Exactly.
don't like to think that, but anger is an
It
emotion. When you get
is.
mad that someone blocked you and you chase them down and dunk on them, that's an emotional response.
Yeah. We're all emotional creatures. And I think, not to get on this tangent, but, especially with females, it's like like emotions from females are not accepted, but an emotion from a male looks like
Hmm.
leadership, looks like just being an
Right.
athlete. But if
Passion.
a female athlete exhibits a different emotion, then she's somehow weak, she's somehow soft. And there's this huge double standard there.
Hmm.
So I think, if you can, number one, as a coach, stop being afraid of your own emotions. That's huge. Stop projecting that. Most of the time coaches see these females that are having these big reactions and they just don't know what to do with it because they're
Hmm.
they're afraid of their own emotional reactions. So if we can start teaching athletes, like, your emotions are your friend, like, what is the thought that led to that emotion? Okay, now how do you play best? And how can we reverse engineer that to get you into that optimal state? Then it becomes this safe environment again where she knows it there's no emotion that I'm afraid to feel or that I'm unafraid to feel. I have to
Yeah,
be
that's good.
aware of this thing first so that I can utilize that to my advantage to get me what I want. So I'm always asking athletes, hey, what story are you telling yourself right now?
Hmm.
What thought is creating this emotion in you? All right, can we choose a different thought that feels a little bit better? What's the mode that you need to be in to get you your result? Now, obviously, we're not tolerating any type of, like, disrespect
Right.
or poor, sportsmanship, things that are, but at the same time, some of that is a part of sports. And again, like, are we allowing our female athletes to be athletes, or are we always
You can
trying to control?
understand an emotional reaction and while still not condoning it.
Correct.
I understand why you did that. Let's work on that next time to
Yeah.
do it better. But like, yeah, as you were talking, I thought of that same girl who asked me if I was mad at her.
Hmm.
We had a game where she's just boohoo crying on the field.
Yeah.
And I thought in the moment she has asthma. So I was like, oh crap, she's having an asthma attack. I got to
Yeah.
get her off the field. And so like next time the ball went out, I pulled, like, she was right in front of me. So I went and pulled her off the field, threw
Hmm.
somebody else out there, and she's sitting on the bench and she's and like exuding all the things that I thought asthma was. So mom comes walking around the field with an inhaler because she didn't have it on her. And she's like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, what's wrong? She goes, I missed again. Like she had went down and missed like 2 or 3 shots in a row. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, and I kind of smiled. I got down on her level and I knew the parents, so I knew it was okay to say this. Like I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't even say this to my kid, but I knew it was language she hears at home. So I was like, hey, you can either get pissed off
Mm-hmm.
and do better, or you can get mad and quit. Which one do you want to do?
Yeah.
And she kind of, and she like, you saw the tears just go from like
Mm-hmm.
boohoo crying to like, no, I'm mad.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go. And then so like, I put her back in it. She didn't score.
Mm-hmm.
No, she did. She scored at the end of the second half and the smile on her face, but she played so hard the rest of that game because she really, like, I don't like tooting my own horn, but I was able to tell her like those emotions are normal.
Yeah.
But
Use
what are
it.
you going to do with? What are you going to do?
Use
Are you
it.
going to get pissed off and go play better, or are you
Mm-hmm.
going to get mad you missed and cry?
Yeah.
And because of her personality, I could be that direct with her.
Mm-hmm.
With my son or my daughter, they're not there. They're wired differently. I could not say it in those words to them, but with her, I was able to. And my daughter had a girl on her team who would get upset at times,
Yeah.
and the mom would just yell at her to stop crying and go play.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I just wanted to be like, no, like it's okay for her to have that feeling. Like
Yeah.
we've got to cultivate that in a way that
Yeah.
uses like, what are we doing to our kids if we tell them that their emotions are bad?
Yeah.
Like,
No, we teach athletes what we call a reset routine, which is a failure recovery process that's rooted in neuroscience. It's really simple, but it's like a 3 to 5 second process that allows them to be aware of what they're feeling. And if they are, and this is sciencey terms, but if they're outside of what we call their window of tolerance. Okay. So in that example with your young athlete, she was outside of her window. She was actually moving into fight or flight, the fast breath, the
mhm.
freaking out, right? That's either
I mean,
like,
it legit mimicked
yes,
an anxiety attack
yes,
or
for sure.
a
So she's what we
asthma
call
attack.
in the red, right? Now, some athletes, they'll go the opposite direction and they will numb and they'll literally disassociate. If you've ever seen athletes, like they're just checked out, they're flat,
Hmm.
like they're not there, they've quietly quit. So that numbing, so they're now in the blue. What we want athletes in is the red, and they can start in, or excuse me, we want athletes in the green, right? So that window of tolerance, the shorter the window, the more their inability is to deal with stress. The wider the window, it's kind of like if you've ever gone white river or water rafting, right? Or if you've ever floated a river, the narrower the river, the more turbulence, the more bumpy it gets. But the wider the river is, it kind of evens out. So we want to help athletes widen that window of tolerance. And sports is supposed to be helping to do this.
If we
But
do it right in sports,
yes,
then when they get to be adults,
yes, but
they have the
often,
tools needed.
right, but oftentimes what we're seeing because of that great rewiring to where we're literally dealing with a different athlete brain, they don't have the how. They don't have the how to just get over it, to just flush it, to just be confident. If they had the how, then they would do it. So now coaching really involves incorporating mental skills. So once you see that athlete starting to happen, we can help her get green by using the reset routine, which is really really simple, but it allows her to go, okay, this is what's happening, and this is what's happening in my body. I'm going to breathe. There's another technique that we use with a combination of a word and a physical anchor that they do. And it's literally rewires their brain to respond differently in stress. And, so then, there's no drama around it. There's no in their head spiraling, because that's the beginning of it. And Jonathan, like if you wouldn't have done that, if you wouldn't have had the wherewithal to come over and have that conversation, you just told her to get over it, snap out of it. Come on, get your head in the game. What's the problem? Hey, get out of your head. Let's go. That only makes it worse, because now she knows there's a problem that she doesn't know how to fix. And so now she's beating herself up for how she's feeling. And it's just, total meltdown from there. So good for you on that one.
Thank you. I'm going to be a little geek in response to that though, just because it made me think of it. Have you watched Ted Lasso?
I've started the first couple episodes, but I haven't watched the full thing.
Okay. So there, I think it comes in season 2 or season 3, and I'll try to describe this, and you tell me if I'm on the right track. Rebecca, the owner of the team,
Yeah.
she
Well,
talks about when,
time out. I think the reason that I struggle with Ted Lasso is because Rebecca is the character from Game of Thrones. Have you ever
yes,
watched
yep.
with the Shane Bell?
Yep.
And I'm just like, I have the hardest time. Like,
Thankfully, I knew of that, but I wasn't a Game of Thrones fan, so I didn't
okay.
have that. But yeah,
Yeah.
she talks about how when somebody asks like, how do you do all this stuff with men? Like you're in these rooms with powerful men, and she said, I think this is a similar thing. Like she in front of a mirror, even in the bathroom, she'll make herself real big, and then go. So there's a physical motion and then a noise she makes, and that resets everything in her brain so that she's able to then go out and do what she needs to do. Is that like, obviously it's exaggerated, but
yeah,
like
that's a great
similar
example.
to what you're talking
That's
about.
a great example. Well, number one, the breath is the biggest thing that you can do for an athlete who is dysregulated. So in that case with your athlete, she's dysregulated. You know, her emotions, her nervous system is dysregulated. She's in fight or flight. The heavy breathing, all those things. So breathing, you would think that most athletes know how to breathe, but we actually don't. Most humans don't know how to breathe, actually. And this most underrated skill is that calming breath. So in through your nose for 3 to 6, and then out through your mouth for 3 to 6. And on that exhale, it's like you're blowing out through a paper straw. With my young athletes, I'll have them blow bubbles. So it's very right. And then we'll have athletes choose a reset word, which we have to unpack this with them, but it's basically based on a visualization from when they've
Okay.
played their best. And they choose a word that triggers that visualization in their subconscious mind so that they know who they are. They remember who they are and what emotions got them to where they needed to be. And then that physical anchor, whether it's a snap or a wiping off a mistake or that, hand motion, whatever it is for them, what we're trying to get athletes to do is anchor into the present. And you can't solve this thinking problem, this spiraling in their head, with more thinking. We have to
Okay.
get them in their body. And so that physical motion gets them in their body and gets them in the present. Because here's what I want all athletes, sports parents, whoever is listening to this to know, is that peak performance happens in the present moment, present in your body, next point, next play, right here. And when athletes are in their head spiraling, which was the case with your young athlete, she's ruminating about the past. So we don't want athletes in the past ruminating about the mistake and, oh my gosh, did I let everybody down? And, I can't believe they're shaming, blaming. Nor do we want athletes catastrophizing about the future. We don't want athletes going, what if this? What if this? Oh, we lost the lead. What if this? And oh my gosh. And they're 10 steps down the road when it's like, hey, we got another inning, we got another play. You got to get back on
Right.
defense, right? The peak performance that we want happens in the present moment. So in these high stress moments where they've made a mistake or they're experiencing pressure, or sometimes even they're celebrating, they're winning, but we got to get back and still get the job done. We want to use that reset routine to ground them in the present, and more importantly, retrain their brain, because the body keeps score. It does, about what they're doing in stress, to overcome. So now they have a new neuro habit of what they do in stress. And over time, we've widened that window of tolerance. That's much more effective than yelling or being in this drama, cycle with your athletes. And, for all the coaches that I teach this to, it gives them a new language. So instead of all of this back and forth, you feeling like you've got to motivate and you've got to be their therapist, their mom, their whatever. It's just like, hey, reset. Hey, let's reset. And they know what that means. And they're empowered over their own thoughts and emotions. So,
Yeah. That's, it feels overwhelming because it's so different than what we've done. But at the same time, there's a simplicity to it that once you get it, it's like,
yeah.
oh, that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
of course, why wouldn't I do that? But until we learn it or we're taught it, which again, we talked about our brains weren't designed for competition. It's also the whole old saying of it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. Like,
Right.
as adults in our 30s and 40s, like trying to learn these new techniques, it's like, good God, there's another method I got to learn now. Like,
Yeah.
what thing was I not doing the best that I need to, like, and so it can feel overwhelming to have to
Yeah.
put another tool in our toolkit. But once we get it, it's like, Oh, that makes so many. Like, we have to put the work in on the front end to learn the new tool, but then
Yep.
the new tool helps make. It's like going from a manual post hole digger to getting the thing that does it for you in 2 seconds. Like, oh, why didn't I buy this 3 years ago? Like, this is so much easier.
Absolutely. You'll save more time, more energy. You'll get your life back as a coach. And you're actually teaching your athletes that resiliency piece that not only are they going to use in their sport, but in the rest of their life. And, I see coaches, that's a common deal. It's like coaches will be like, is this just one more thing that I have to do? And I'm like, yeah,
But
it,
it eliminates 7 other things you were doing.
exactly. Like, walk me through how things were going. Don't you want a better way? And I think as coaches, we have to have a growth mindset instead of that fixed mindset of, this is the only way it is. I can never change. I'll always be this person. This
And
is
as
how it
parents,
is.
too.
Yeah, kids are soft, the old generation, blah, blah, blah. Instead of like, can we do what we're asking our kids to do, which is adapt? Can we do what we're asking our kids to do, which is adjust, which is to grow? And, it's like I'm capable of learning new things. My brain, the brain is amazing. Like, I
We're
love,
asking 8, 10, 12 year olds to learn how to do something they've never done
yeah,
before. Shouldn't we be willing to also learn how to do
correct.
things we have never done before as well?
Correct. I always tell my coaches, lead from the front. And when you lead from the front and when you model by example, your athlete and your teams are going to follow. Yeah.
Yeah, we could go on that route forever, but I want to switch gears a little bit because you do focus on girls.
Yeah.
And the reason you focus on girls is because girls and boys are wired differently. It's just a
Correct.
natural way in human biology.
Correct.
Without giving us a dissertation, can you explain in the simplest way possible, which I know is asking a ton here,
Yeah.
can you explain some of the like neuroscience
Mhm.
differences between boys and girls and how our brains are wired?
Yeah, so girls have a higher developed prefrontal cortex, which handles the executive functioning in their brain, which just means they're better leaders. And it also means that they are handling a lot more information all at once than males do. They're also extremely hypervigilant because they actually have access to both sides of their brain at once. So both hemispheres of the brain communicate back and forth, whereas boys typically only use one side of the brain, which is why if you tell like a young boy, hey, go jump off that roof, they're like, yeah.
All right, I got to interrupt you because all right, we're recording this in January. It's
Okay.
going to come out later in the year, but I was playing disc golf yesterday and I'm back in the middle of the woods and there's a probably 15-foot wide creek
Okay.
that is frozen over because it was January and we've had a cold snap.
Okay.
And all I wanted to do was throw a giant rock into the ice on the creek. That's like, I'm with 3 other guys. Like, I'm 38, one guy's 43, one guy's 34, one guy's like 28. Like, and I'm like, why do I want to do this? Am I a child? They're like, no, you're a dude. I found a rock and I
Yes,
threw it and
literally.
it literally bounced off the ice and we all go, and one guy goes, I bet we could walk across that. But like, it's just the difference in the way guys and girls are neurotypically wired.
100. So the female in that example is going, I wonder what would happen if I walked out there and I would probably, fall through, then I'd get pneumonia. Then somebody else might walk out behind me and drown, and then I'd have to save them from drowning. Like, the female brain is always assessing danger,
Mm-hmm.
tend to be future thinking. So when you have all of that going on, what happens is just have a more active brain. And
And
it's
I'm a
not,
fairly educated guy who is
yeah.
aware of this stuff, and I still default to that position.
Yeah, yeah. Back to evolution, right?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about evolution from that standpoint too, think about this. As females, what is typically, we're designed to like protect the baby, right? Protect life, to feed and nurture that life. And historically, females are having to protect themselves from lion, tigers, and bear, and unfortunately, sometimes men, right? So the scanning, the hypervigilance, is happening all the time. have a much more active emotional brain because they're assessing and taking in so much more information. Like women's intuition is truly a
Hmm.
thing,
Yeah.
right? And so because of that, because of that very active brain, what can happen sometimes is they're more susceptible to anxiety and depression, not because their brain is weaker or softer, but because it's extremely strong. It's like human 2.0. And oftentimes that female brain is not getting the nourishment, is not getting the breaks, is not getting, the fuel that they need, the skills, the mental skills to live her life. It's kind of like, if you're driving an Audi or like some incredible vehicle, you've got to put special gas, in that car. The maintenance is different because it's operating at such a higher rate of speed, right? It's like with a computer system, I can't use an old iPhone charger to plug in the brand new, no iPhone for whatever reason. So, the brain is just doing a whole lot more, and it needs specific things to feel safe and to feel nourished and to thrive. So I
Can
hope
you
that
give
answered your
us?
question without the dissertation. Did that do it? Did that do it?
Yeah, I mean, it brings more questions that I wish we could get into, but
Mm.
I'll put you on a little bit of a spot. How would you, let's say that our kid has a rough game,
Mhm.
comes off the field crying,
Mhm.
and they're upset. Maybe they struck out, maybe they missed a goal, maybe they missed a free throw, whatever it is. How would you respond to a young boy in that situation differently than a young girl, just based off of how their brains are wired?
Yeah, I think that for me, honestly, I probably wouldn't respond, very different. I think that's very
Okay.
subjective based on the kid, but for me, if someone's having a tough game, as a parent, you're as a sports parent, your job there is just to be a neutral support system, and you also have to know your kid and kind of how they're wired and how they play. Not to go off on another tangent here, but athletes are different. We have more athletes that are more aggressive, that really
Hmm.
they hack their fight response, and then we have athletes that are more cool, calm, chilled, and laid back. But I after a tough game, I'm just saying, "Hey, I'm here for you. Hey, I'm here for you." That's it. And like allow them to process. I'm not like rushing in to solve the problem. I'm not rushing in to immediately make them feel better. I'm just saying, I'm here for you. I'm here for you. I'm going to let them lead. And then I'm going to say, where do you want to go eat? Like, that's it. Like, that is it. I'm going to say, hey, I'm here for you. And where do you want to go eat? And then I'm going to let them have their process. I have a free download on my website called How to Reclaim the Car Ride Home, which I highly recommend every sport parent get. I literally give you a script for how to handle this and how to walk through it. But, you have to let your kid feel that process. Um, you have to let them do their thing. For some kids, they're going to jump in and they're going to be like, I hate this, blah, blah, blah. Some are going to be crying. Some are going
Some are
to,
going to ask for coaching.
yeah, some are going to go stoic and need a minute,
Hmm.
but you've got to let them lead that. Remember, your job is to be a neutral support system and to be there for them. And when they're ready to talk, you can be there, but ask open-ended questions. Don't rush in to give advice. Don't rush in to coach. Let them figure this thing out.
That video on social media is going to get some comments when I clip this out and post that with all the parents saying, "No, I got to coach right away. How are they going to get better?" And it's just
Oh gosh, no way, man.
let them lead. Is if this like, I talk a lot about youth sports are not about winning, but if there was a secondary subtitle for the show, it would be "Let Them Lead."
Yeah.
Let the kid lead when you go competitive. Let the kid lead when you go to extra practices. Let the
Uh-huh.
kid lead, as opposed to throwing all the things on them that we think they should be doing.
Absolutely. One of my videos on TikTok that like kind of went mini viral was one where I said, if you haven't had this conversation with your athlete daughter, you need to have it now. And this is your journey, not my journey. I will match your energy, but I will not be pushing you towards this. If you need help, I will help you, but it's not my job to get you ready for practice, do all these things. Like,
Hmm.
this is your journey. And from here on out, I will match the energy that you put into it. But this is not a deal where mom or dad is going to be putting in 80% and you're putting in 20. So I'll match your energy, but no longer am I going to be the driving force here.
Yeah. We had a coach, a women's soccer coach from the University of Florida on a couple weeks ago, and he talked about he was the youth coach for the number one female soccer player in the country.
Cool.
And her parents said that we will take her as far as she tells us she wants to go.
Yep.
But the second it ends up with us driving the ship, we are out.
Absolutely.
Like if she's not the one driving it, we're done.
Absolutely. Because what are you going to do with that athlete when she gets in college? What are you going to do? Like you can't go to college with her,
Right.
so it's like, again, that's why, our system that we teach athletes is called the empowered athlete system, because they have to be empowered over their own mental game, which is 90% of success. Yet nobody has a plan for it. Nobody has a plan for the mental game outside of just be confident,
Right.
be mentally tough, get it together. We don't have a plan for
You was
that.
kind, you was smart, you was good. Go
Yeah.
play your game.
They're like, okay, but how, right?
Yeah.
So they have to be empowered over their process. They have to be empowered over their thoughts and their emotions. They have to be empowered over what they give power to, whether it's a coach or a negative teammate or, a situation that they're allowing to just, destroy their journey. So, our job, guys, our job is to raise adults. Are
I'm not
you
trying to raise a good kid.
like,
I'm
are
trying to
your
raise a healthy
job?
adult who has every tool they need to be a
Yes.
functioning person in society.
Your job is to raise an adult, not someone who is dependent on you. And I know that that's very difficult because as parents, we feel good. It feeds into our ego, right? Like it makes us feel good to do all of these
And that's a
things.
natural thing. That's
Normal,
natural.
totally normal, totally natural, but it's actually hindering, your child in the long run. One of the best books on this topic, I think, is actually it's called How to Raise an Adult. It's like how to prepare your kid, for college. I love the work of Dr. Daniel Amen. He talks a lot about the female brain, but he says, one of the things that will hinder the brain development is for you to do everything for your kid. You have to let your kid figure stuff out. If they
And
leave,
that includes failing.
that includes failing, right? Why are they so afraid of failing? Let's talk about this for a minute. Probably because they've never been allowed to. And it's tough. It's tough to watch your kid fail. It's tough to watch your kid struggle. But failure is where they learn. I'm not saying that like it's okay, like we're just out here doing stupid stuff that's putting us in
It's not that
danger.
you don't try to win,
Yeah,
but
but like,
failure is the teaching device.
right, it is. That's the only way people learn. And if you're constantly, robbing your child of those experiences, then their brain is not going to develop, right? It's like you want your kid to be confident and to play all out, but do you? What's the culture like at home around mistakes and failure and perfection, right? And who does your child believe that she is, outside of her sport, because of all of this? So it's like you got to give your kid the space and permission to figure all of this stuff out.
And I would even go, I don't know if it's a step further or a step first, but the question of why am I so scared for my kid to fail?
Right. It's because you believe that your child is an extension of you, and that if your kid fails, then you are a failure, right? Like your kid
And
is
if they perform well, that means
then
you're a good parent.
right. I can't remember where I heard this, but it was like, you don't need to take credit for your kids' successes or their failures.
Hmm.
Or like if you're going to take credit for their success, something like vice versa, like that. It's
Yeah.
like their journey is their own journey, right? Your job is to be a guide, not a god.
You've given a lot of encouragements through this, but I always like to end the episodes on just a straightforward encouragement.
Yeah.
So, for the parent who is overwhelmed, for
Okay.
the parent who doesn't know what they're doing, who wants to support their kid in the
Yeah.
best way, and they've listened to this and it just feels so freaking overwhelming.
Yeah.
What is your encouragement to them this week as they parent their athlete?
My encouragement is for y'all to do things outside of your sport. My encouragement is for you to just take your kid to lunch, go get ice cream, like to have fun. Like maybe what you actually need is a big step away. is a big like step back to look at what our why is here. But to do things like go on a walk, like to do things with your kid outside of any type of performance or outcome that is just spending time with them. Like just I just love to be with you. You know, we don't always have to have this goal or this thing that we're going after. And our kids need to know that. Our kids need to know that who they are is they're so much more than their sport. They're so much more than their performance in anything. So, you know, I would just encourage, like, let's bring some fun back in to this thing, right? Like, when's the last time we did something like just totally goofy and fun together that didn't have any sort of purpose?
My daughter tells me I'm cringy now. And then she
Yes.
laughs at me when I do the cringy things at
Oh,
home.
she
Doesn't
loves
want me
it.
to doesn't want me to do it doesn't
No,
want me to do it with her friends. But when I do it at home, she just giggles like a
she
little
loves
girl.
it.
And
Absolutely.
so like,
So, so that what I
go be cringy with your kids, guys.
Yeah, just have fun. You know, like this is not, you know, we're not curing cancer here. You know, it's not that deep, right?
Right.
Like it's not that deep. It's really not. And I'll just say, like, for parents too, like your fight or flight is activated through all of this. You are outside of your window of tolerance, probably. You know, so again, like we were saying with the coaches, lead from the front, you lead from the front. Like what do we need to do to get you in the green? You know, and most of the time it's going to be like stop trying to control things you can't control and go have fun, you know?
Coach, Coach Lindsey, thanks so much. This has
You're
been
so
incredible. I
welcome.
appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. Thanks.
That's it for this week. If you like the show, we ask that you please leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, it'd be a huge help if you write up a small review. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you go ahead and hit that like and that subscribe button. If today helped you out, the best way to help us grow the show and reach more people is to share this episode with a friend. Most of all, we hope you have a great week watching your kids play the sport that they love. We hope you have great conversations in the car and at home. And we hope that your relationship with your kids is strengthened through the activity of sports. Have a great weekend, everybody.